In this video, we're counting down 15 places around the world where people live below sea level. These are real, permanently inhabited locations, ranging from major cities to small agricultural communities, where daily life takes place at elevations lower than the ocean itself. Let's start with number 15, Baku, Azerbaijan. Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, is one of the only major cities in the world located below sea level. It sits roughly 28 meters or 92 feet below the surface of the Caspian Sea. The city is home to more than 2 million people, and it's an unusual combination of old and new. Its location on the Absheron Peninsula extending into the Caspian has always made it both strategic and vulnerable. Its below sea level elevation is a result of the surrounding geography. The Caspian Basin itself lies within an enclosed depression that formed millions of years ago when the tectonic movements isolated it from open ocean. Life in Baku has always revolved around adaptation. The city's early settlers, dating back thousands of years, built homes and fortifications on slightly raised ground to avoid flooding from the Caspian, which periodically rises and falls due to climatic and geological factors. The lowest parts of Baku, particularly near the industrial coastlines, are vulnerable to water intrusion. During the 1970s and 80s, when the Caspian sea level rose significantly, large areas of coastal infrastructure, including parts of roads and oil installations, were flooded. Engineers had to reinforce embankments, construct barriers, and regrade certain neighborhoods to keep the sea at bay. Baku's economy has been built largely on oil and gas, industries that flourished precisely because of its geological depression. The world's first modern oil well was drilled here in 1846, and by the early 20th century, Baku produced more than half the world's oil supply. The landscape around the city, semi-arid, flat, and heavily industrialized, still bears signs of more than a century of extraction. Beneath the city's streets run pipelines and storage networks, and large offshore platforms can be seen from the coast. Despite its unusual geography, Baku has modernized rapidly. The city's known for its striking blend of medieval architecture, like the 12th century Maiden Tower, and ultra-modern developments like the Flame Towers. The low elevation does present challenges. Underground construction must account for the high water table, and heavy rainfall can quickly overwhelm drainage systems. Engineers use pumping systems and carefully graded infrastructure to prevent accumulation in the lowest zones. Unlike some below sea level settlements protected by dikes or levees, Baku relies mainly on a natural elevation change within the city itself. Some parts rise to over 100 meters above sea level, creating a natural slope toward the coast. This uneven topography helps reduce the risk of widespread flooding, but makes urban planning more complex. The city's residents have learned to live comfortably in their below sea level environment. The climate's dry, with long hot summers and mild winters. The Caspian provides a moderating influence, cooling the city in the summer and keeping it warm in the winter. Yet the same inland sea occasionally brings storms that push waves over the coastal promenade. To counter this, the Baku Boulevard, an iconic public walkway along the waterfront, has been reinforced repeatedly over the years. Baku's below sea level status also influences its groundwater and salinity. The soil near the coast contains high salt concentrations, which can corrode metal and concrete over time. Engineers use specialized building materials and sealants to protect foundations, especially in new developments like the Port Baku Towers. In short, Baku is a rare example of a thriving capital city below sea level that has not required massive artificial defenses like the Netherlands. Its survival and growth depend on a combination of engineering, vigilance, natural slopes, and constantly monitoring of the Caspian's shifting waters. As sea levels continue to fluctuate, a pattern driven by climate cycles rather than global ocean changes, Baku's engineers remain alert to the possibility that the city's relationship with its inland sea may once again demand adaptation. Number 14. The Qattara Depression Settlements, Egypt. The Qattara Depression in northwestern Egypt is one of the deepest natural depressions on Earth, reaching about 133 meters or 436 feet below sea level at its lowest point. It spans roughly 19,500 square kilometers and lies west of Cairo and south of the Mediterranean coast within Egypt's western desert. Although the depression itself is mostly uninhabited due to the harsh desert conditions, small settlements and research outposts exist around its edges, where some people have managed to live and work in one of the lowest habitable areas in Africa. Unlike coastal lowlands that rely on levees or seawalls, the Qattara Depression is surrounded by desert and completely enclosed by higher land. It contains no direct connection to the sea, which prevents flooding, but also isolates it from freshwater sources. Its floor is covered with salt flats, dry lake beds, and wind-shaped dunes. The elevation traps heat, making daytime temperatures soar above 45 Celsius or 113 Fahrenheit in summer. Rainfall is practically non-existent, less than 25 millimeters per year, and what little moisture arrives quickly evaporates. Despite these conditions, small human activities occur around the depression's periphery. Bedouin communities traverse its outskirts, relying on deep wells and oases. The Alamein region to the north and Siwa Oasis farther west serve as logistical hubs. In a few scattered places, research camps and oil exploration stations maintain a temporary human presence. Workers in these facilities live in prefabricated housing with supply convoys bringing water and fuel. Historically, the depression has fascinated engineers and geographers. In the 20th century, several proposals sought to transform it into a man-made lake. The idea was to dig a canal from the Mediterranean, allowing seawater to flow downhill into the depression, where evaporation would generate hydroelectric power. While theoretically possible, the project was never pursued due to cost, logistics, and environmental concerns. Flooding the depression would have also displaced the few nomadic groups that lived nearby. The Qattara region is notable for its natural hazards. The salt crust hides patches of soft mud that can trap vehicles, and strong winds shape massive dunes that shift unpredictably. The depression also contains remnants of World War II minefields near its northern edge, a legacy of the North African campaign. Many areas remain unsafe to explore without clearance operations. The few permanent settlements near the depression, such as those close to Mogra Oasis, exist because of underground aquifers that supply limited fresh water. These communities raise small herds of goats or camels and sometimes engage in salt collection. The residents endure isolation, extreme heat, and limited infrastructure. Power usually comes from diesel generators or small solar arrays. While Qattara's below-sea-level geography is dramatic, it's also stable. Unlike coastal lowlands threatened by sea rise, it's protected by surrounding ridges. For scientists, the depression provides a natural laboratory to study desertification, wind erosion, and hydrology in one of the Earth's most extreme lowland environments. Today, the Qattara Depression remains both a symbol of geological uniqueness and a reminder of how inhospitable low-lying terrain can be without access to water. Its few human enclaves show that even below sea level, in the heart of a desert, people can adapt, but only on a very small and carefully managed scale. Number 13. Jericho, West Bank. Jericho is widely recognized as the lowest permanently inhabited city on Earth, located approximately 250 meters or 820 feet below sea level in the Jordan Valley. This elevation is well established by topographic surveys and is closely tied to the tectonic structure of the Jordan Rift Valley, part of the larger Dead Sea Transform fault system. The land here has been slowly subsiding for millions of years as the African and Arabian plates move relative to each other. Jericho's extreme low elevation has not prevented continuous human habitation. Archaeological evidence from nearby Tel es Sultan shows that people have lived in this area for over 10,000 years, making it one of the oldest continually inhabited places in the world. The reason people were able to settle here, despite the harsh geography, is water. Jericho sits near several reliable freshwater springs, most notably the Ain es Sultan Spring, which has provided a consistent water source since prehistoric times. These springs feed irrigated farmland in an otherwise arid region. The city's climate is directly shaped by its position below sea level. Jericho is significantly hotter than surrounding highland areas. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 Celsius or about 104 Fahrenheit, and winter temperatures remain mild, rarely approaching freezing. Rainfall is low, averaging roughly 200 millimeters per year, but the presence of groundwater makes agriculture possible. Date palms, citrus fruits, bananas, and vegetables are commonly grown, and Jericho is sometimes referred to locally as the City of Palms. Modern Jericho is a small city by global standards, with a population in the tens of thousands, but it functions as an important regional center. Roads and infrastructure do not require flood defenses like levees or pumps because Jericho is not exposed to the sea. Instead, its challenges are related to heat management, water use, and salinity. The soil and low-lying parts of the Jordan Valley contain elevated salt levels, which can reduce crop yields if irrigation is poorly managed. Farmers rely on controlled watering and drainage systems to prevent salt accumulation. Building construction in Jericho must also account for the groundwater table. Foundations are designed to handle moist soils, and deep basements are uncommon. Unlike coastal below sea level cities, the main environmental risk here is not flooding, but water scarcity and long-term aquifer depletion. Overuse of groundwater across the Jordan Valley has lowered water tables in some areas, making conservation a critical issue. Jericho's location has also shaped its historical role. Because the Jordan Valley is a natural corridor between Africa and the Levant, the city has long been a waypoint for trade and migration. Its low elevation made it agriculturally productive relative to the surrounding deserts, which supported early urban development. Today, tourism tied to archaeological sites and religious history remains economically important. Jericho demonstrates that living far below sea level doesn't automatically require massive engineering defenses. Instead, its long survival depends on stable geology, reliable fresh water sources, and careful management of heat and soil conditions. It's an example of how extreme elevation alone doesn't determine habitability. Access to water and adaptation matter far more. Number 12. Zuidplaspolder, the Netherlands. Zuidplaspolder is the lowest inhabited land area in Europe, with parts lying about 6.7 meters or 22 feet below sea level. It's located in South Holland, east of Rotterdam. Unlike natural depressions such as Jericho or the Qattara Depression, Zuidplaspolder exists entirely because of human engineering. It was originally a peat bog and shallow lake system. Beginning in the Middle Ages and accelerating in the 18th and 19th centuries, Dutch engineers drained the land using windmills and later steam-powered electric pumping stations. Removing water caused peat soils to oxidize and compact, a process known as land subsidence. As a result, the ground surface continued to sink even after drainage was complete, pushing the land further below sea level over time. Today, Zuidplaspolder is home to thousands of residents living in towns, suburbs, and farming communities. Daily life here depends on an extensive system of dikes, canals, pumping stations, and water management authorities. Water levels are actively controlled at all times. Rainfall, groundwater seepage, and river inflow must be pumped out continuously to prevent flooding. Without this system, the area would revert to a lake within days or maybe weeks. Infrastructure is designed with water control as a primary consideration. Roads are elevated, buildings are constructed on reinforced foundations, and utilities are sealed against moisture. Some newer developments incorporate floating or water-adaptive construction techniques, although most housing remains conventional. Flood risk planning is highly regulated, with zoning rules that limit dense development in the lowest zones. Unlike coastal cities such as Rotterdam, Zuidplaspolder's flood risk comes mainly from internal water accumulation, not direct exposure to the sea. However, failure of regional dikes along nearby rivers could allow water to flow into the polder. For this reason, the area is integrated into the Netherlands' National Flood Defense Strategy, which includes layered safety systems, prevention, spatial planning, and emergency preparedness. Agriculture remains important in the polder, with dairy farming and greenhouse horticulture common. Farmers must carefully manage soil moisture, as overly dry conditions can accelerate subsidence, while excess water threatens crops. The balance is maintained through controlled drainage rather than complete dryness. Climate change has added complexity. Heavier rainfall events increase pumping demands, while rising sea levels make it harder to discharge water into rivers during high tide. Dutch water authorities continuously upgrade pumps and reinforce dikes to keep pace with these pressures. These adaptations are documented and ongoing, not speculative. Zuidplaspolder shows the most engineered form of below sea level living on Earth. Unlike places where people adapt to a natural depression, here the land itself exists only because of constant human intervention. Its continued habitability depends entirely on maintaining that system, making it a clear, real-world example of how technology allows permanent settlement below sea level, but only with a continuous effort. Number 11. Dead Sea Hotel and Residential Area, Israel. Ein Bokek is a small resort and residential area on the western shore of the Dead Sea, located at approximately 430 meters or 1,410 feet below sea level, making it one of the lowest inhabited places on Earth. While Ein Bokek is not a large city, it does have a permanent population made up of hotel staff, service workers, and nearby residents who live in a year-round setting, defined almost entirely by its extreme elevation and environment. The Dead Sea sits within the Dead Sea Rift, a tectonic depression formed by the movement of the African and Arabian plates. This geological setting is well documented and explains why the entire region lies far below global sea level. Ainbokek exists on a narrow strip of relatively stable land between the Dead Sea shoreline and steep desert cliffs rising sharply to the west. This natural boundary limits expansion and concentrates development into a tightly managed zone. Life in Ainbokek is shaped by intense heat and aridity. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit, and annual rainfall is typically less than 50 millimeters. There are no natural freshwater rivers flowing into this part of the Dead Sea, so all potable water must be transported via pipelines from northern Israel. Desalination plants elsewhere in the country feed into national water infrastructure, which supplies Ainbokek and other Dead Sea communities. Water scarcity here is a constant concern, and usage is closely regulated. The settlement exists primarily to support tourism. Hotels line the shore, built to withstand high salinity, corrosive air, and unstable soils. The Dead Sea's extreme salt concentration, over 9 times saltier than the ocean, affects construction materials, metal infrastructure, and vehicles. Maintenance costs are higher than in most other inhabited regions, and buildings require frequent inspection and reinforcement. One of the most significant challenges facing Ainbokek is the retreat of the Dead Sea shoreline. Over the past several decades, the Dead Sea has been shrinking rapidly due to upstream diversion of the Jordan River and mineral extraction by Israel and Jordan. As the water levels drop, underground salt layers dissolve, causing sinkholes to form. Thousands of sinkholes have appeared along the western shore, while Ainbokek itself has been protected through land use controls and geological surveys. Nearby areas have been closed or rerouted to avoid unstable ground. Despite these risks, Ainbokek remains permanently inhabited because its economy depends on continuous operation. Hotels, medical tourism centers, and spa facilities operate year-round, and workers live locally to support them. Emergency planning accounts for heat stress, flash flooding in nearby wadis during rare rain events, and geological instability. There are no flood defenses against rising water because the Dead Sea level is falling rather than rising. Health considerations are also unique. The air pressure below sea level is higher, resulting in increased oxygen density. This has been studied and documented particularly for respiratory and skin conditions, and is one reason the region attracts medical tourism. These effects are measurable and real, though not considered curative in a medical sense. Ainbokek demonstrates a modern service-based form of permanent habitation at extreme negative elevation. Its continued existence relies on national infrastructure, geological monitoring, and careful land management. It's one of the clearest examples of people living far below sea level, in a place where environmental conditions are naturally severe, but technologically manageable. Number 10. Turpan Depression Settlements, China. The Turpan Depression is one of the lowest land areas in Asia, with its lowest point, Adying Lake, reaching about 154 meters or 505 feet below sea level. Within the depression lies the city of Turpan and a network of surrounding towns and villages that together support a population of several 100,000 people. This makes Turpan one of the largest and most densely populated regions on Earth that lies below sea level. The depression is located in the eastern part of the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region and is surrounded by mountain ranges, including the Flaming Mountains to the north and the Tian Shan Range further away. These mountains block moisture from reaching the basin, creating an extremely arid climate. Annual rainfall averages less than 20 millimeters, while summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 Celsius, that's 113 Fahrenheit, with recorded surface temperatures among the highest ever measured in China. Despite these conditions, permanent settlement has existed in the Turpan Depression for over 2,000 years. The key to survival has been water management. The region is famous for its Karez system, underground irrigation channels that tap mountain runoff and transport water across long distances while minimizing evaporation. Many of these systems were built centuries ago and are still in use today, although modern wells and pumps have supplemented them. Agriculture remains central to life in Turpan. The region is known for grape cultivation, particularly seedless varieties dried into raisins. Vineyards thrive because irrigation water is carefully controlled and soils are mineral-rich. Residents also grow melons, cotton, and other heat-tolerant crops. Farming schedules are adapted to the extreme temperatures, with much work done early in the morning or late in the evening during summer. Buildings in Turpan reflect long-term adaptation to below sea level heat. Traditional homes often have thick walls, courtyards, and ventilation towers designed to promote airflow and reduce indoor temperatures. Modern construction still incorporates passive cooling techniques alongside air conditioning. Underground storage rooms are common, taking advantage of the cooler subsurface temperatures. Unlike coastal below-sea-level regions, Turpan faces no flood risk from oceans or rivers. Instead, its primary environmental risks are water depletion and desertification. Overuse of groundwater has lowered water tables in some areas, placing stress on the Karez systems. Chinese authorities have documented the impacts and have restricted new wells in certain zones to preserve long-term water availability. Transportation and infrastructure must also contend with heat-related wear. Roads, rail lines, and power systems are designed to tolerate extreme thermal expansion. Turpan lies on a major rail and highway corridor connecting eastern China to Central Asia, making it an important logistical hub despite its harsh environment. The Turpan Depression shows that large-scale, long-term habitation below sea level is possible without coastal defenses, provided water can be reliably sourced and managed. Its population survives not through modern engineering alone, but through a combination of ancient techniques and contemporary infrastructure. It stands as one of the clearest examples of a naturally occurring, heavily populated lowland basin, where people have adapted to life far below sea level for centuries. Number 9. New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans is one of the most well-documented examples of a large, modern city where people live below sea level. Significant portions of the city, especially neighborhoods like Lakeview, Chantilly, and parts of New Orleans East, sit 1.5 to 3 meters or 5 to 10 feet below mean sea level. This condition is not theoretical or disputed, it is confirmed by U.S. Geological Survey elevation data and long-term engineering surveys. New Orleans occupies a deltaic landscape formed by the Mississippi River. Over thousands of years, the river deposited layers of sediment that created low, swampy ground barely above sea level. When the river shifted course naturally, sediment supplied to some areas stopped, and the land began to compact and sink. This process is known as subsidence, and it continues today. Human activity, including drainage, construction, and river leveeing, accelerated the process by drying out soils that once stayed saturated. Permanent settlement expanded rapidly in the 19th and 20th centuries after engineers installed drainage canals and pumping systems. These systems made it possible to build in areas that were once wetlands, but also caused the ground to sink further as water was removed from compressible soils. As a result, much of modern New Orleans now lies below sea level and depends on constant mechanical pumping to remain dry. Unlike naturally enclosed depressions, New Orleans faces direct exposure to the Gulf. To protect the city, an extensive system of levees, flood walls, gates, and pumps surround the urban area. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers manages the structures, which are designed to reduce but not eliminate flood risk. While the system doesn't keep water out at all times, instead it allows rainwater and groundwater to be pumped out while blocking storm surge from entering during hurricanes. Daily life in below sea level neighborhoods depends on this infrastructure functioning continuously. Rainfall that would naturally drain away in higher cities must be mechanically removed. During heavy storms, pumps can be overwhelmed, causing temporary street flooding even without levee failures. These events are documented and relatively common. The risks of living below sea level became globally visible during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, when multiple levee failures led to catastrophic flooding. While this event revealed serious design and maintenance failures, it didn't change the fundamental geography of the city. After Katrina, flood defenses were rebuilt and reinforced, and new surge barriers were installed. These upgrades are documented in engineering projects and not speculative solutions. Despite the risks, hundreds of thousands of people continue to live in New Orleans because of economic ties, cultural roots, and existing infrastructure. The city's port, tourism industry, universities, and energy sector connections anchor the population in place. Relocation on a large scale has not happened. Importantly, New Orleans is not uniformly below sea level. Some natural ridges near the Mississippi River remain slightly elevated. Historically, wealthier and older neighborhoods developed on these higher areas, while lower ground was settled later as a drainage technology improved. This uneven topography still influences flood risk today. New Orleans shows how below sea level living can persist in a large urban environment, but only through constant engineering intervention. Without pumps and levees, much of the city would revert to marshland. Its continued habitability is not a matter of speculation, it is a daily operational reality. Number 8. Coachella Valley, California. Coachella Valley contains several permanently inhabited communities that lie below sea level, particularly in areas surrounding the Salton Sea. The surface of the Salton Sea sits at approximately 69 meters or 226 feet below sea level, and nearby towns like Bombay Beach, North Shore, and parts of Mecca occupy similarly low elevations. The basin exists because of tectonic activity along the San Andreas Fault System. Over geologic time, the land subsided, creating a closed basin with no natural outlet to the ocean. Historically, the Colorado River periodically flooded this depression, forming large inland lakes that later evaporated. The modern Salton Sea was created accidentally in 1905 when irrigation canals failed and diverted the Colorado River into the basin for nearly 2 years. Permanent settlement followed not because of the lake itself, but because of agriculture. Irrigation transformed the surrounding desert into productive farmland. Towns emerged to support farming operations, transportation, and later tourism. These communities were built with full awareness that they were sat well below sea level, but unlike coastal cities, they face no risk of ocean flooding. The surrounding terrain isolates the basin completely. Life below sea level in the Coachella Valley is shaped primarily by heat and air quality rather than water intrusion. Summer temperatures routinely exceed 40 Celsius or about 104 Fahrenheit, and the low elevation contributes to heat retention. Buildings rely heavily on air conditioning, and infrastructure is designed to withstand prolonged heat stress. Water management is central to surviving in the basin. Irrigation canals bring Colorado River water to farms, and runoff historically flowed into the Salton Sea. As water use has become more restricted, inflows have declined, causing the sea to shrink. This has exposed dry lakebed sediments that can become airborne dust, affecting air quality in nearby communities. These impacts are documented by state and federal environmental agencies. Despite environmental challenges, residents remain. Housing in towns like Bombay Beach is modest, and many residents are long-term locals with economic ties to agriculture, geothermal energy projects, or nearby resort cities. Others live there because housing costs are lower than in coastal Southern California. Infrastructure below sea level here doesn't rely on pumps or levees. Drainage flows naturally towards the lowest point, the Salton Sea Basin. Flooding is rare and typically associated only with extreme rainfall events, which are infrequent in this desert climate. The Coachella Valley demonstrates a different model of below sea level habitation. Unlike cities that must constantly fight incoming water, these communities exist in a closed desert basin, where elevation itself is not the primary hazard. Instead, sustainability depends on water availability, heat tolerance, and environmental management. Together, these settlements show that people can live well below sea level without massive flood defenses, provided geography isolates them from the ocean. The challenge is not staying dry, but enduring extreme climate conditions in one of North America's lowest inhabited landscapes. Moving on to number 7, the Death Valley settlements in California. Death Valley contains the lowest land elevation in North America, with Badwater Basin reaching approximately 86 meters or 282 feet below sea level. While much of Death Valley is uninhabited desert, there are permanent human settlements within the valley that exist below sea level, most notably in and around the Furnace Creek area. These settlements are small, but they are real continuous communities rather than temporary camps. Death Valley lies within the Basin and Range Province, a region shaped by tectonic stretching that caused large blocks of the Earth's crust to drop downward between the mountain ranges. This process created deep enclosed basins like Death Valley, which has no outlet to the ocean. Over time, water that once flowed into the basin evaporated, leaving behind salt flats and mineral deposits. On the valley floor's extreme low elevation is stable and well documented by geological surveys. Furnace Creek sits slightly higher than Badwater Basin but still lies below sea level. It supports a permanent population made up of National Park Service employees, resort workers, and their families. Housing includes staff residences, utility buildings, and service infrastructure that operates year-round. These residents live there continuously, not seasonally, despite the extreme environment. The primary challenge of living below sea level in Death Valley is heat, not flooding. Summer temperatures frequently exceed 45 Celsius, that's 113 Fahrenheit, and ground surface temperatures can be far higher. The low elevation contributes to heat trapping, as hot air becomes confined within the basin. Annual rainfall averages less than 60 millimeters and some years receive virtually none. As a result, water availability is carefully managed. Fresh water comes from groundwater-fed springs originating in surrounding mountain ranges. Furnace Creek itself was named for its water source, which made early settlement possible. Today, water use is strictly regulated to protect fragile desert aquifers. Wells and springs are monitored, and consumption is limited to essential residential and operational needs. Buildings in Furnace Creek are designed for extreme thermal conditions. Structures typically have thick walls, minimal windows, and shaded layouts. Underground utilities are insulated against heat, and outdoor work schedules are adjusted to avoid peak daytime temperature. Air conditioning is essential, and power infrastructure must be capable of sustained operation in intense heat. Unlike many other below-sea-level settlements, Death Valley faces no risk from rising seas or storm surge. The surrounding mountains isolate the basin completely. Flash flooding can occur during rare rain events when water rushes down from higher elevations, but this water drains towards the valley floor and evaporates rather than accumulating. Economic activity in Furnace Creek centers on park operations and tourism. Death Valley National Park receives visitors year-round, and maintaining services requires permanent staff presence. This makes Furnace Creek one of the clearest examples of people choosing to live permanently in a below-sea-level environment, purely because of employment and infrastructure, not agriculture or coastal access. Death Valley settlements show that extreme negative elevation alone doesn't prevent habitation. However, survival depends on controlled water usage, heat-adapted construction, and reliable external supply chains. It's an example of below-sea-level living where environmental limits are absolute and non-negotiable. Number 6. Flevoland Province in the Netherlands. Flevoland is the largest area of reclaimed land in the world and one of the most significant regions where large populations live below sea level. Much of Flevoland lies between 3 to 5 meters or 10 to 16 feet below sea level, with some areas even lower. Unlike naturally formed depressions, Flevoland exists entirely because of deliberate human engineering. The province was reclaimed from the former Zuiderzee, a shallow inland sea connected to the North Sea. Beginning the early 20th century, Dutch engineers enclosed sections of the sea with massive dikes and pumped out the water, converting the seabed into dry land. Flevoland consists primarily of the Zuidplaspolder and the Flevopolders, completed between the 1940s and 1960s. Today, Flevoland is home to over 430,000 residents, living in towns like Lelystad and Almere. These are not historic cities gradually adapting to low elevation. They were planned from the ground up with below sea level living in mind. Roads, housing, utilities, and drainage systems were all designed around continuous water control. Life in Flevoland depends on integrated systems of dikes, canals, and pumping stations. Rainwater, groundwater seepage, and river inflow are constantly managed. Without active pumping, the province would flood rapidly, reverting to a shallow lake. This isn't hypothetical, it's a known and modeled outcome confirmed by Dutch water authorities. Buildings are constructed on stable clay soils deposited by the former sea. Foundations are engineered to withstand long-term moisture exposure, and basements are uncommon or specially sealed. Urban planning places essential services on slightly elevated zones within the polder, while agricultural land occupies lower areas that can tolerate temporary saturation. Agriculture plays a major role in Flevoland's economy. The reclaimed soils are fertile and support large-scale production of grains, vegetables, and tulips. Farmers coordinate closely with water boards to maintain precise soil moisture levels, balancing crop needs against subsidence risk. Flood risk in Flevoland comes primarily from dike failure, not rainfall. The surrounding lakes and waterways sit higher than the land itself. For this reason, dike inspection and reinforcement are continuous. Emergency evacuation plans exist and are regularly updated, though no major flooding event has occurred since reclamation. Climate change has increased the complexity of water management. Higher river levels, increased rainfall intensity, and rising sea levels place additional strain on pumping systems. Dutch authorities have responded by upgrading pumps, strengthening dikes, and expanding water storage capacity. These measures are documented ongoing engineering responses rather than speculative plans. Flevoland represents the most extreme large-scale example of permanent human habitation below sea level. Unlike older cities that adapted over time, Flevoland was designed with full awareness of its vulnerability. Its continued existence depends entirely on sustained engineering, institutional management, and public investment. It demonstrates that below sea level living can support entire provinces, but only with constant control of the water. Number 5. Aktau, Kazakhstan. Aktau is a coastal city on the eastern shore of the Caspian Sea, where people live below global sea level. Much of the city sits at about 28 meters or 92 feet below sea level, a figure confirmed by topographic and geodetic surveys of the Caspian Basin. Aktau's elevation is not the result of land reclamation or subsidence, but of the natural geography of the Caspian Depression, one of the largest enclosed lowland basins on Earth. The Caspian Sea itself lies well below ocean level because it has no natural outlet. Over millions of years, tectonic subsidence and evaporation lowered the basin, creating a vast inland sea isolated from the world's oceans. Aktau was built directly on this low-lying coastline. Unlike many below sea level settlements, it faces an inland body of water rather than open sea, which changes the nature of its environmental risks. Aktau was founded in 1961 as a planned Soviet city, originally called Shevchenko. Its purpose was to support uranium mining, oil exploration, and later offshore energy development in the Caspian Sea. The decision to build here was strategic rather than environmental. Proximity to mineral sources and shipping routes outweighed concerns about elevation. From the beginning, the city was designed to function in a dry, low-lying environment with limited fresh water. Fresh water availability is one of Aktau's defining challenges. The surrounding region is arid with very low rainfall and no major rivers. To support a permanent population, the city relies heavily on desalination. It operates desalination facilities that convert Caspian seawater into potable water, supplemented by limited groundwater resource. This reliance on desalination is not speculative, it is a documented necessity for the city's survival. The climate is harsh but stable. Summers are hot and dry, while winters are cold and windy. The Caspian Sea moderates temperature extremes slightly, but dust storms and strong coastal winds are common. Despite being below sea level, Aktau doesn't require large-scale flood defenses like levees or pumping systems. The Caspian's water level fluctuates over the decades, but changes are gradual rather than storm-driven. When water levels rose in the late 20th century, some low coastal infrastructure required reinforcement, but widespread flooding of the city did not occur. Urban infrastructure on Aktau reflects its planned origins. Residential blocks, industrial zones, and port facilities were laid out with clear separation. Buildings are constructed on stable bedrock and compacted soils rather than soft delta sediments, reducing subsidence risk. Basements are uncommon, partly due to groundwater considerations and partly due to the Soviet-era construction norms. Today, it has a population of over 200,000 people. It functions as a regional hub for Kazakhstan's offshore oil and gas industry, shipping, and logistics across the Caspian. The port of Aktau connects Kazakhstan with Azerbaijan, Iran, and Turkmenistan. These economic functions anchor the population in place, making relocation unrealistic despite the city's unusual elevation. Aktau demonstrates that large permanent urban populations can exist below sea level without constant flood control, provided the surrounding geography is enclosed and stable. Its primary vulnerabilities are water supply and climate, not inundation. The city's continued viability depends on maintaining desalination capacity and managing coastal infrastructure as Caspian sea levels slowly change. Number 4. Imperial Valley communities in California. Imperial Valley is a heavily populated agricultural region in southeastern California where multiple communities lie below sea level. The city of El Centro, the county's seat, sits approximately 13 meters or 43 feet relative to mean sea level. Surrounding towns like Brawley and Calexico occupy similarly low elevations within the Salton Trough, a tectonic depression extending from Southern California to Mexico. The Salton Trough formed as part of the same fault system that includes the San Andreas Fault. Over geologic time, the land subsided, creating a deep basin isolated from the ocean by surrounding higher terrain. Like other closed basins, it periodically filled with water when rivers overflowed and then dried as the water evaporated. The modern landscape reflects that history, with flat terrain, saline soils, and naturally low elevation. Permanent settlement in the Imperial Valley became possible in the early 20th century due to large-scale irrigation projects that diverted water from the Colorado River. This transformed the desert into one of the most productive agricultural regions in the United States. Crops like lettuce, alfalfa, winter vegetables, and hay are grown year-round. Towns developed to support farming, processing, and cross-border trade with Mexico. Living below sea level in the Imperial Valley does not require levees or pumps to keep water out. The region is far inland and completely isolated from the ocean. Instead, water flows into the basin through irrigation canals and drainage systems, eventually reaching low points near the Salton Sea. Flooding is rare and typically linked only to unusual rainfall or irrigation systems failures, not external water sources. The dominant environmental challenge is heat. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 43 Celsius or 110 Fahrenheit, and the low elevation contributes to heat retention. Residents adapt through building design, work schedules, and near-universal use of air conditioning. Agricultural labor is often scheduled during early morning or nighttime hours in peak summer. Water management is central to life in the valley. While irrigation water is abundant by desert standards, it's tightly regulated and allocated. Drainage canals are necessary to prevent salt buildup in soils as evaporation concentrates the minerals. Without controlled drainage, farmland would quickly become unproductive. These systems are actively managed by irrigation districts and are well documented. Unlike coastal below sea level cities, the Imperial Valley faces no threat from rising seas. Its risks are tied instead to long-term water availability from the Colorado River, air quality issues linked to dust from the shrinking Salton Sea, and the extreme heat. These factors influence public health and economic stability, but they don't threaten immediate habitability. El Centro and surrounding towns have existed for more than a century and support a population of over 180,000 people across the valley. The region includes schools, hospitals, transportation infrastructure, and international border crossings, and below sea level elevation is a defining geographic fact, but it's not the primary constraint on daily life. The Imperial Valley illustrates a common pattern among inland lowlands. People can live below sea level without major structural defenses when geography isolates them from the ocean. In these environments, survival depends not on holding water back, but on managing heat, salinity, and long-term water resources in a closed basin. Number 3. Atyrau, Kazakhstan. Atyrau is a major city in western Kazakhstan, where large parts of the urban area lie below global sea level, generally around 20 to 22 meters or 66 to 72 feet below it. The city sits at the northern edge of the Caspian Sea Basin, straddling the Ural River just before it flows into the Caspian. This low elevation is a natural feature of the Caspian Depression, not the result of land reclamation or modern subsidence. Atyrau's geography is shaped both by river and basin dynamics. The Caspian Sea is the world's largest enclosed inland body of water and lies well below ocean level due to long-term tectonic subsidence and evaporation exceeding inflow. The surrounding land slopes gently downwards towards the sea, placing the Atyrau firmly within this below sea level zone. Topographic surveys consistently confirm the city's negative elevation. The city has been inhabited since at least the 17th century, originally as a fishing and trading settlement known as Guryev. Its location at the mouth of the Ural River made it an important link between inland Central Asia and maritime routes across the Caspian. The river provided fresh water, which has been essential for sustaining permanent settlement in an otherwise arid region. Modern Atyrau is a major center for Kazakhstan's oil and gas industry. Large onshore and offshore energy fields in the northern Caspian region have driven rapid population growth. Today, the city has a population of over 300,000. Residential districts, industrial facilities, ports, and transport infrastructure all operate below sea level without the need for levees or flood walls. Flood risk comes primarily from river flooding, not the Caspian itself. Seasonal snowmelt in the Ural River's upper basin can raise water levels, occasionally causing localized flooding along the riverbanks. These events are monitored and managed through embankments and river regulation rather than large-scale sea defense. Caspian sea level fluctuations occur over decades and are relatively slow, allowing for planning and adaptation. The city's climate is continental and dry. Summers are hot, winters are cold, and annual precipitation is low. Being below sea level doesn't significantly alter flood risk, but it does influence groundwater behavior. In some low-lying areas, groundwater sits closer to the surface, limiting the depth of building foundations and discouraging basements. Engineers account for this through shallow foundations and careful drainage design. Freshwater supply is supported by the Ural River, treated and distributed through municipal systems, and unlike other below-sea-level cities in arid regions, Atyrau does not rely heavily on desalination. However, water quality management is important due to industrial activity upstream and near the coast. Atyrau shows how a large, economically important city can exist below sea level without constant mechanical water control. Its stability depends on enclosed geography, river management, and gradual adaptation to Caspian sea level changes. Elevation alone has not limited its growth or permanence. Number 2. Gorsafi and Southern Jordan Valley. Gorsafi lies in the southern Jordan Valley near the southeastern shore of the Dead Sea, at approximately 350 to 400 meters, or 1,150 to 1,300 feet below sea level. It is one of several permanently inhabited agricultural communities in this region, which together form one of the lowest inhabited zones on Earth. The Jordan Valley is part of the Dead Sea Rift, a tectonic boundary between the African and Arabian plates. This rift created a deep linear depression extending from the Sea of Galilee to the Gulf of Aqaba. The Dead Sea occupies the lowest point in this system, and communities like Gorsafi are located along its margins on slightly elevated but still deeply negative terrain. Gorsafi has a long history tied to agriculture. The flat valley floor combined with year-round warmth allows for continuous crop production. Farmers grow vegetables like tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers, often harvesting multiple cycles per year. Irrigation water is drawn from a combination of groundwater wells and managed surface sources. Without irrigation, agriculture would not be possible in this extremely arid environment. Daily life below sea level here is shaped by heat and salinity rather than flooding. Summer temperatures frequently exceed 40 degrees Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit. Rainfall is minimal and evaporation rates are high. Soil salinity is a persistent issue, especially as the Dead Sea water levels have declined and groundwater chemistry has changed. Farmers migrate through this controlled irrigation and drainage to flush salts from the root zone. Unlike coastal below-sea level settlements, Gorsafi faces no risk of ocean inundation. The Dead Sea is shrinking, not expanding, due to reduced inflow from the Jordan River and mineral extraction. However, this decline has led to the formation of sinkholes in some nearby areas where underground salt layers dissolve. These features are mapped and monitored, and development avoids known risk zones. Gorsafi itself remains stable and continuously inhabited. Housing and infrastructure reflect adaptation to extreme heat. Buildings are typically low-rise with thick walls and minimal insulation against cold, which is rarely an issue. Air conditioning is common but not universal. Roads and utilities are designed for high temperatures and saline dust. The population is relatively small compared to large cities, but it is permanent and multi-generational. Schools, medical clinics, and local markets operate year-round. Residents remain because of agricultural livelihoods and long-standing ties to the land. The southern Jordan Valley demonstrates a pattern seen in several below-sea level regions. When freshwater can be accessed and managed, extreme elevation does not prevent permanent settlement. The challenge is not holding water back, but managing heat, salinity, and long-term groundwater sustainability in one of the lowest inhabited landscapes on the planet. Number 1. The Dead Sea Basin. The Dead Sea Basin is the lowest continually inhabited region on Earth, with permanent communities living at elevations ranging from roughly 350 meters to over 430 meters, or 1,150 to 1,410 feet below sea level. This is not a single town or a city, but a broad geographic basin that includes settlements on both the western and eastern shores of the Dead Sea, as well as agricultural zones farther inland within the Jordan Rift Valley. What makes the Dead Sea Basin unique is not just how low it is, but the scale and duration of human habitation across such extreme negative elevation. The basin exists because of tectonic forces along the Dead Sea Transform Fault, a major geological boundary separating the African and Arabian plates. Over millions of years, repeated fault movement caused the land between the two plates to drop downward, forming a long, narrow rift. This rift eventually filled with water, but because it has no outlet to the ocean, evaporation exceeded the inflow, leaving behind an increasingly saline lake. The result is the modern Dead Sea, whose surface lies more than 430 meters below global sea level, lower than any other exposed land on Earth. Settlement around the Dead Sea predates written history. Archaeological sites throughout the basin show evidence of habitation, agriculture, and trade going back thousands of years. People were drawn to the region not because it was easy to live in, but because it offered resources unavailable elsewhere. The area provided rich mineral waters, bitumen deposits, fertile soils in irrigated zones, and a strategic corridor connecting Africa, the Levant, and Arabia. Today, permanent populations live in several distinct zones within the basin. On the western side, communities in Israel and the West Bank occupy narrow strips of land between the Dead Sea and steep desert escarpments. On the eastern side in Jordan, towns and agricultural villages spread across the southern Jordan Valley. These settlements are separated politically, but share the same geologic and environmental conditions. Life below sea level in the Dead Sea Basin is dominated by heat, aridity, and salinity, not flooding. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit, and rainfall is extremely low, often less than 50 millimeters per year. Evaporation rates are among the highest recorded anywhere on Earth. Because the basin is enclosed by higher terrain, there is no risk of ocean inundation, and the Dead Sea itself has been shrinking for decades rather than expanding. Water availability is the defining constraint on the permanent habitation. Natural freshwater springs exist in some areas, fed by aquifers originating in surrounding highlands. Historically, these springs were supported by oasis-style agriculture. In modern times, groundwater wells, pipelines, and national water infrastructure supplement the natural resources. Irrigation makes large-scale farming possible in areas that would otherwise be barren desert. Crops are selected for heat tolerance and fast growth, allowing for multiple harvests per year in some locations. Soil salinity is also a persistent challenge. As water evaporates, salts accumulate in the soil, reducing productivity if not carefully managed. Farmers counter this through controlled irrigation and drainage, flushing salts away from the root zones. These techniques are well documented and have been used in various forms for centuries. Without them, agriculture at this elevation would not be viable. Infrastructure in the Dead Sea Basin reflects adaptation to extreme conditions. Buildings are typically low-rise and compact, with construction materials chosen to withstand corrosive saline air. Metal corrodes faster here than in most environments, and concrete requires protective treatments. Underground construction is limited, partly due to groundwater behavior and partly due to geological instability in certain zones. One of the most serious modern hazards in the basin is sinkhole formation. As the Dead Sea level declines, primarily due to diversion of the Jordan River and mineral extraction, fresh water dissolves the underground salt layers, causing the ground above to collapse. Thousands of sinkholes have formed along both shores. These are mapped and monitored, and development avoids the known risk areas. While sinkholes have damaged roads and forced relocation of some facilities, they have not eliminated permanent habitation in the basin. Economically, the region supports several distinct activities. Agriculture remains central in the valley communities. Tourism is significant along the Dead Sea shoreline, where resorts and medical facilities operate year-round. The basin is also home to large-scale mineral extraction operations that harvest potash, bromine, and other salts from evaporation ponds. These industries require a permanent workforce, anchoring populations in place despite environmental challenges. Health and atmospheric conditions in the basin are unusual but measurable. Air pressure is higher than that at sea level, and ultraviolet radiation is partially filtered by the thicker atmosphere and surrounding terrain. These factors have been studied extensively, particularly in relation to respiratory and skin conditions. While the environment is often marketed for health tourism, it's not medically classified as curative. The effects are physiological, not speculative. The Dead Sea Basin's continued habitation depends on constant management rather than large defensive structures. There are no levees holding back water and no pumps preventing inundation. Instead, survival depends on water allocation, geological monitoring, infrastructure maintenance, and adaptation to long-term environmental change. This makes the basin fundamentally different from below sea level regions like the Netherlands or New Orleans. What sets the Dead Sea Basin apart as the #1 example of below sea level living is scale and extremity. Nowhere else on Earth do people live so far below sea level across such a wide area, in such a harsh climate, and for such a long continuous period of history. Its settlements are not experimental or temporary. They are stable, permanent communities that show how human habitation can persist at the lowest elevations on the planet, not by resisting nature, but by working within very strict environmental limits.